I mean, it doesn't happen very often on this programme. The benefit sometimes of having pictures and not just audio. A few of you urging Leslie not to be so perturbed by that intervention from Donald Trump when Keir Starmer was answering a question about Canada. And I've checked the footage as well myself at your urging. And you're right. He was clearly telling the journalist not to come back with a supplementary, not to come back with a second question. He was not telling Keir Starmer to shut up. Keir Starmer was coming to an end, and Donald Trump was telling the journalist who'd asked the question about Canada to be quiet. That was enough. One journalist who also asked a question, although not about Canada, was LBC's political editor Natasha Clark. I do want to ask you a question which we would file under what was it like, but I don't want to do so without stressing that you had you earned your right to be there. It might be a career moment, but it's a culmination of lots of things that you've done before. So I don't want to talk to you as if you were a tourist, but I do want to talk to you as someone who's much older than you and who has never been near the White House. So what was it like?
Oh, just mad, James. It's just been a mad 24 hours, but fantastic and really good to be representing LBC on the world stage. But
in the front row.
Yeah, and we, the British press pack are amazing, and we all rally around each other. And it's very much a camaraderie spirit with us on those trips, and we all work in lockstep, like the Prime Minister would like to say, hand in hand to make it a success. And, Number 10 and Downing Street do a fantastic job of looking after us on them. So it is, without them, we couldn't do it.
Shall we have a little listen to your moment?
Yep, go for it. So I wanted to ask Donald Trump about the prospect. And actually, I'd actually scripted this question in the minutes before we did go to that press conference. And because I thought, look, we haven't talked about a trade deal at all. It's something that the press love to ask about. Are you going to do a trade deal with the UK? And he actually put me to the post by saying, we've already restarted those talks. Here's what he had to say.
Hi, Natasha Clark from
Hi.
LBC. Mr. President, you've said you're working on a new trade deal with Britain, which we of course welcome. President Obama once said Britain was at the back of the queue for that trade deal. Where are we now? When do you think we're going to see that?
Well, they didn't do well with President Obama. He'd never got a lot of things done, and he didn't get a trade deal done that was of any importance or magnitude. We've had great discussions on trade, and I think we're going to have a deal done rather quickly as it can be done. We're going to have something, I think, rather quickly. We expect to do that.
Before my inbox is full of people complaining about Natasha bringing Barack Obama into the equation, when Donald Trump, of course, had 4 years as president to sign trade deals with, it's quite hard to keep track of how many different
Everyone
conservative prime ministers and didn't do so. The point is that that's how you get him to respond in a more meaningful and substantive way, which is exactly what he did.
Exactly, and I knew that bringing up a former president is the easiest way to get Donald Trump to give you a nice answer and to lean into the idea that he can do something unprecedented, historic, that's different to other presidents. And like you say, you make the very good point that he did have 4 years under Theresa May and Boris Johnson to do a deal, and there are so many people that still think this idea that we could do a trade deal with the US that's totally pie in the sky.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I didn't want to rain on anybody's parade. But, Kemi Badenoch described essentially 2 signatures scribbled on the back of a postcard as a trade deal when she was business secretary. It's not going to be a trade deal in any meaningful sense, because as any trade negotiator will tell you, they take years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Downing Street sort of sources said to us on the way back that this is not going to be a full fat trade deal, and they were perfectly happy to lap up the front pages today from the Express and the likes of other press saying this is a great deal. But it's not going to be a full fat trade deal. It's going to be an AI sector by sector mini deal that's in reality all that we're going to get from the US right now. But you know what? Let's see how it goes.
Technically, even an exemption from tariffs that other European countries are exposed to could be described as a trade deal, and it would also be extremely desirable at this point.
Yeah, totally. And look, Keir Starmer has done incredibly well on this trip. I think it's fair to say he has come back making progress on a number of key issues, and one of those is tariffs. And you heard from President Trump yesterday saying that that was one of the things that Keir Starmer had lobbied him on over lunch, and he was a really tough negotiator. I don't think anyone's ever said that about Keir Starmer before, that he's a tough negotiator.
Well,
if the art of the deal man is saying that, then
people who knew him as Director of Public Prosecutions would have said that.
A negotiator, I wouldn't have described him as that. I would have described him as a good, good communicator, effective, but maybe not a negotiator. And I think Donald Trump absolutely heaped praise on him at that press conference, and not least over the idea of there could be a carve-out deal for tariffs. And if he was to hit our steel industry with 25% tariffs, it would be huge. So the idea that he could get some sort of carve out, it's not, of course, a done deal, but I think Downing Street are pretty pleased with the progress that they've made.
And we're back to this. It's not your business because you're a proper journalist who deals only in what you see in front of you, and your job is to report it. But those of us who are allowed to indulge our feelings and opinions are back to feeling absolutely ridiculous because, well done, Keir Starmer, says one voice in your head, and then the little cartoon character pops up on your other shoulder and says he should have told him where to stick it. We should have told him he should have stuck up for Canada. He should have stuck up for Zelensky. He should have reminded him of some of the awful, egregious things that he's done in the past. But he didn't, and he can't, because the national interest is served by keeping this man sweet. On the plane back, how is that great song in Hamilton about being in the room where it happens? And you were in the room, well, not quite the room where it happens, but you were in the room where they tell you what happened in the room where it happens.
Yeah.
How much acknowledgement is there of the fact that, as was proved most perfectly by the J.D. Vance question from Chris Mason at the BBC, and Trump's pretense that he couldn't remember ever saying that Vance was a dictator, how much acknowledgement is there that what looks like a win on a Thursday evening could have been rendered utterly meaningless and even denied by Friday afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I think there is an acknowledgement of that in Downing Street, but were genuinely really happy, and Keir Starmer himself was genuinely really happy when he came back onto the plane. And I think he was really nervous talking to us on the plane over there. He's a cautious man anyway, but
big match nerves.
He did not want to say absolutely anything that could derail the talks. And one aide told us that he'd heard what Macron had said earlier in the week about, I don't want to get ahead of the talks. And he used that line about 15 times on the plane. I don't want to get ahead of the talks. I don't want to get ahead of the talks. And he knew, I think, how much was completely riding on this. And, your point about this is what keeps the relationship sweet. That is what serves the national interest. He absolutely knew how to play that. I don't know if you caught the end of that press conference where he was talking with Donald Trump about, we both know the value of winning. That is the language that Donald Trump wants to hear. And actually, from a guy that dragged the party from the left, took it back into control and brought it back into the election-winning machine that it's just proven to be, that is something that both him and Donald Trump do have in common. I think he was right to sort of stress the strengths of the special relationship and the things that we have in common, rather than just all of the issues where these two people, who of course are diametrically opposed politically, and all of our differences, of course they're there. We know they're there. But, Keir Starmer's argument is we've got to get on with stuff. We've got to deliver. We
were briefly back to the Ming vase and the ice rink, weren't we?
Yeah.
Very much so, which of course is something, as you remind us, that he proved his facility with.
Honestly, I genuinely thought that Donald Trump was going to derail this whole thing, and I was completely proven wrong.
And I suspect everyone in the room did they? You'd have these conversations with other journalists. You were wondering which fireworks were going to go off first.
There were so many things that could have gone wrong for him, and I don't think Donald Trump has read the detail of the Chagos deal. I think that's.
But he couldn't read the letter from the King either, because he doesn't wear his reading glasses in public. So that's why he had to ask Keir Starmer to read it too.
Yeah, and I think he genuinely wasn't quite sure at first whether it was real or not, and was like, "Is this just a stunt for the cameras?" But yeah, that absolutely is the case, that he's done this Ming vase strategy, and it's continuing to work across the ice rink. And I think they'll be really happy with that. Yeah, the Chagos deal. Yeah, for now. And look, he can't do a deal with the US and the EU. He can't do both. He is going to have to choose. Some of these things are going to unravel. There is still a huge question mark today over what this Ukraine peace deal looks like. Zelensky, of course, flying in to meet with Donald Trump in a few hours' time to sign this minerals deal. Could we see that, derail anything that's happened that Keir Starmer and Macron have set the groundwork for so far? It's incredibly fragile at the moment. I don't think the Ukraine peacekeeping agreement and this idea of a US guarantee is definitely set in stone yet. There's still lots of question marks about what that's going to look like.
And that's today. So the pendulum could start swinging back before tea time.
I think
today.
So far so good. That's how I
quite a few people. I may have heard it slightly differently from me, and obviously some tongues will be firmly in some cheeks, but quite a few people are bringing your question back to you. Rich perhaps speaks for them best when he writes, "I'd like to thank Natasha for getting us a trade deal."
I think so. That's completely fair enough.
Take the win.
I would deserve a knighthood if a damehood if
you can have one of each. You can have one of each.
I trust you'll be putting the application to the Honours Committee yourself, James.
And finally, that theatrical moment at the very beginning. Give us an idea of how that went down in the room. I mean, it's up there presumably in sort of moments of diplomatic impact, it's hard to think of, because Trump's reaction was extraordinary.
Sorry, which bit are you referring to?
The letter, just literally opening it, because it took him by surprise, I think, genuinely.
It took him by surprise. I didn't think he
Starmer
expected
doing something we don't associate with Starmer, which is doing something quite what the word I wanted, performative, I suppose.
And I've got a bone to pick with him, because I asked him on the way over there, are you going to give him a state visit? And he very, very, dodged my eye line, and I think knew that I was getting onto something there, and said, it's not in my gift to offer a state visit, but we know how Donald Trump is a huge fan of the royal family, and they left it at that. And I tried to ask again. I said, "Well, it's in your gift too, Prime Minister," and he didn't want to go into that, knowing he had that letter from the King literally in his jacket pocket at the time,
and not knowing that it would go down better than their wildest dreams could have hoped.
Yeah, look, I don't think it was Donald Trump likes making history, likes being treated specially.
It's unprecedented. It's so special. It's never happened to anybody. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. It's a brooch of purest green. Here you are, President.
Yeah, exactly. And Starmer completely lent into that, and he was gushing about him and using some of that Trumpian language, which I'm sure we'll talk about at Prime Minister's questions. Those are the words that would never have been uttered from Keir Starmer's mouth had Donald Trump not entered the White House, and we would not be talking, as I said previously to you before. This Prime Minister would not be cutting foreign aid spending had he to pay for defence rises had he not been going to visit Donald Trump in the White House this week.
And as that raindrop on the parade lands, Kumar goes a little further. It says, I find it offensive that Trump would blackmail a country under occupation by Russia to sign away their mineral rights. Well, remember that Trump tried to blackmail Volodymyr Zelensky when most of the country was not under, or the attack upon Kyiv hadn't even taken place, the annexation of Crimea notwithstanding. Trump tried to blackmail Ukraine before the most recent Russian invasion. So the idea that he won't have another crack this time, now that Ukraine is compromised by that continuing engagement, is, as Kumar well knows, pie in the sky. But I'm with Mark on this, who has messaged me on Blue Sky to say Starmer negotiating and responding to Trump came across like a man using his barrister skills. He's prosecuting the case for his client, and in this instance, his client is our country, the UK.
Keir Starmer has been a chameleon for his entire political career. He fits into the background. He adjusts himself wherever he needs to. He told the left of the Labour Party what they wanted to hear to get elected. He promised to scrap tuition fees, things like that, and then gradually, slowly moulded the party into what he wanted it to be. And this is no different. He sees this, as no different in terms of the strategy that he has to do what has to be done to get the outcome. And I think it's no coincidence that some of the aides that were on this trip are people that do genuinely realise the value that having a strong relationship with America can bring. And these were people that were over in America for the election and that picked up on a lot of what was going on. And some of those aides sort of was telling me a few months ago that we need to be able to show as a Labour Party to avoid going down the trap of letting the far right parties, people like Nigel Farage, into government potentially. We need to be able to show that we are actually getting on and delivering for these people, because if not, it's going to lead to someone like Donald Trump, someone like Nigel Farage in number 10.
How do they make sense of this? I presume Kemi Badenoch, if she had any blood vessels left unburst, they would have gone at the mention of Chagos. She'll be absolutely livid about this. Farage's attempt to pretend that he's best mates with Donald Trump has withered on the vine. Elon Musk has already given him a very public slapping. I won't really pollute my inbox by going to have a look at what they're saying. But how?
Do you want me to read out Kemi Badenoch's tweet to you?
Yeah, why not? What sort of contortions are they undertaking? I've seen sort of one of the far-right characters on Twitter who pays Elon Musk for a blue tick is making homophobic jokes about how Keir Starmer is sitting. So I know what the rump will be doing. They'll just be indulging all of their usual bigotries and hatreds. But public figures, politicians, how on earth do they make sense of the fact that Starmer has, for now, managed to not just mollify but also seduce Donald Trump?
Yeah, and done it incredibly well. But yeah, Kemi Badenoch's trying to claim that this was all her idea first.
I'm frightened of saying anything in case I patronise her.
Look, George, so she said, in my first PM keys, I called for 2.5% on defence, a Trump visit, restarting the US-UK free trade agreement that President Biden paused.
Bless her.
So she's trying to say, well, I said it first.
That's wonderful.
She says on Chagos, the president's words on Chagos aren't a guarantee it serves our national interest or taxpayers. We haven't seen the final terms. We must not foot the bill for surrendering territory the UK holds. I do still think this is going to blow up the Chagos deal. I genuinely don't think it's going to happen, but, I'm not a betting woman, so I won't make a bet with you on that.
Sure. And Farage?
I mean, I haven't heard from him in a while.
Well, there's a phrase I've never heard before in my life. Well, we shall find out. So he's back in his
he's back in his box.
His regular slot on Monday on the Nick Ferrari show.